to strengthen and nurture our institutions. Lord, show us the right steps to take for leading and sustaining these awesome villages of learning and love. Help all of us to do our part to continue to make them whole and viable always. These we ask in thy name. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. To my friend John Howard, I want to thank him for arranging this town hall meeting so that we can get the right information. I spent a lot of time these last few days, last few weeks, explaining to folks what happened. How did we get to this point? Why do we have bills that address something that is so crucial and so urgent and so sinister, so nefarious to our institutions? And I want to start by looking at, and I wish I could move, I don't like being so far away from it. I want to start with last summer. Last summer, prior to that, at the end of last session, not this session, but 2018, Senator Nakima Williams, along with Gail Davenport, Senator Gail Davenport, a graduate of Spelman, Senator Nakima Williams, a graduate of Alabama State in Montgomery, Senator Harold Jones, a graduate of South Carolina State, of course in South Carolina, Senator Tanya Anderson, a graduate of Alabama State, or did I mention Tanya? I'm not sure. And yours truly, a graduate of Fort Valley State University, along with Senator Lester Jackson, a graduate of Payne College in Augusta. We asked for, and we were able to get, a study committee. Now there's a huge difference between a study committee and a bill. Just remember that as you follow what I'm saying. Study committees are asked for just like bills, but they sunset usually, and you know what sunset, they end in the same year that they are petitioned. If we ask for it in 2018, session starts January, second Monday in January of each year in Atlanta, Georgia. And there's January, February, March, 40 days, not consecutively, but 40 days of being at the legislature in Atlanta, not consecutive. So we kind of run January, February, end of March, we're done, 1st of April. So it sunsets of that same year, and study means just that. We gather as a committee and we study different topics. This topic was about historically black institutions in the state, universities and colleges in the state of Georgia. That's what it was about. Study, not a bill. Big difference. And let me just enlighten you on some of the things that we went over last summer, which will lead up to where we are today with 273, SB 273, and SB 278. And this, we delve deeply into the changing face of HBCUs in the state of Georgia. So the Senate Study Committee was chaired again by Nakima Williams, and some of you may be familiar with Nakima because Nakima is now the executive director of the Democratic Party of the state of Georgia, the entire state. The first thing we talked about, and there were 3 issues that we focused on. 3 issues: enrollment of students, dealing with recruitment, retention, quality, and today's diversity. We talked about leadership. Who's going to lead, or who is leading, or who will lead these institutions? Presidents, provosts, deans, and the quality of the leaders that we get in our institutions. We talked about fundraising, huge issue. Endowments, alumni giving, and the conversation was always about how to save and preserve our HBCUs. How to save and how to preserve our HBCUs. So those are leading factors. You gotta have students to have a campus. You have to have good leadership in order for that campus to thrive and to grow. And you must have resources. And just as Ms. Malone has pointed out to you, in a very clear and precise manner, that resources for HBCUs have always been what? Very, very scarce. We've had to jump through a lot of hoops in order to get just sometimes the bare necessities over the years. We also know that HBCUs are funded based on enrollment. Just remember that, enrollment. So those schools that have the larger enrollments probably get more monies from the state and the federal government. We also know that there's funding through grants, then your endowments, alumni giving. Just hold that point, alumni giving. So the goal of the study committee was to provide legislative policy. This was not a bill, remember that. It's a study committee, and I will continue to say that because I want you to understand just how everything morphed into 273 and 278. But we were there so that we could meet with HBCU staff from the 3 different HBCUs and talk about those 3 important issues. We journeyed, and we also wanted to know how we could help the private HBCUs as well, like your Clark, your Morehouse, your Spelman, because those are sister institutions as well. We researched questions such as, how do HBCUs provide student success, academic achievement, that more importantly lead to career success? We don't go to college just to have fun. And you know, I recently watched a couple of the folks whose parents were able to get them into college via pay. Our children don't go through those kinds of regimens in order to get into college. Most of them, well, we have quite a few that leave because they don't have that extra what? $500, $200. And that's where alumni giving comes in. So our children, or HBCUs, are there to make sure that our children can compete and that they can provide quality living on their own. And they can have careers, and those careers that foster creativity and connectivity in communities all over the United States of America. Not just Georgia, but we have alumni, and believe you me, I've heard from a lot of them. To be remembered, remarkably, HBCUs have managed tremendous success because the majority of you in this room are successful HBCU graduates, and you contribute so much to your communities, to your state, and to your nation. They have managed, in spite of the sparsity of resources, and we have already alluded to that. And then they've managed to graduate students that probably did not or would not have gone to college if these HBCUs were not welcoming. They were not welcoming. PWIs, predominantly white institutions, for years, when they were white institutions, excluded blacks. They were not allowed to come. So, our only option was Fort Valley State, Albany State, and Savannah State, public institutions in the state of Georgia. Presently, there are 101 HBCUs in the U.S., including public and private, and that's down from 121 institutions that existed during the 1930s. And these 101 HBCUs, and I want you to listen carefully to these numbers, enrolled only about 20% of today's black undergraduates. Only about 20% of today's black undergraduates. After the major push for integration, and I think Ms. Malone alluded to that. What was it, a bad action that turned into a good action that turned into something bad? The push for the integration of PWIs during the Civil Rights Movement. We want to integrate. We want to go to UGA. We want to go to Georgia State. And if any of you have gone to Georgia State recently, you know that Georgia State has more minorities, black students, than all three institutions, HBCUs, combined. And on any given day during school, or when school's in session, especially during the regular year, if you walk downtown Atlanta, we're there. Everywhere. Because everybody wants to go to the city now. Or and if you go to a lot of the counselors' offices, on the high school campuses, you can't even find a counselor that will steer a student into an HBCU. They don't even talk about them. But during the push for the integration of PWIs during the Civil Rights Movement, it escalated the decline of black enrollment in HBCUs. We also talked about, as a study committee, how do we increase enrollment? We talked about many different ways to do that. Attractive learning options. Okay? Meaning, yes, we can educate teachers, we can produce teachers, we can produce a lot of the traditional professionals, but how do we move away from that? How do we get into the cybersecurity and other professions that are so much more advanced and so much more in demand now. But we've also, what do I want to say? We have abandoned the teaching field. We do not produce in HBCUs, we do not produce teachers at the rate that we should anymore. We've abandoned it because we said it's not a cutesy thing and nobody wants to do it and it doesn't pay well. So we don't do it. But we need to have black teachers in our schools. Relevant learning options, the job market, and we want folks to be ready when they leave these institutions to embrace and to be able to find jobs and have professions and to become leaders in their communities. That's what HBCUs did for us. I know it did it for me. At Fort Valley State University, we learned leadership when we were there. We must have global competencies. You're not just competing with the next county over. You're competing with China, Russia, Japan, Dubai, India, all over the world. It's a global thrust. And this is what we have to do in order to survive as an HBCU. Do we study abroad?
Yes.
Yes, we do. But we can do more. We can do more. We can have more internships for our students. And not to be afraid to compete. Sometimes we are afraid to put our students out there because we say, oh, we're not good enough. But Fort Valley State competed against Georgia Tech the other day, and they were very successful in winning some kind of competition. I read about it, but I can't remember all the data. How do we improve graduation rates? And here again, we get students into school. How can we retain them? If these students are lacking $200 here, $500 here, $1,000 here, who's there to help them make up the difference? We have a responsibility also as alumni. First generation students, who's at home to help the student pay for the college education? And if you look at the cost of educating students in the state of Georgia, especially through our public institutions, it's pretty cheap for those of us that have a job, but for those that don't have anything coming in, because we have some students that show up hoping that somebody will let them what? Stay. Somebody will let them stay on that campus right across the bridge. They don't have all their money. But we do a lot of recruitment. Now, I'm noticing that we do a lot of recruiting out of Atlanta. But we never go to Tata or Tipton or Clay County or Calhoun County. Those are my counties. I have 11 counties. And when I go down and I talk to those seniors that are getting ready to go off to college, I said, how many of you are going to Albany State? And we may have, maybe one hand. And then I'll say, well, where are you guys going? Georgia Southern, Georgia State. And they'll say, well, nobody came to talk to me.
Okay.
Nobody came to talk to me. I'm going to get you. Marketing and branding. How do we market our schools?
We brand.
What is our brand? And sometimes when we're talking to each other, we say things about our schools that are disparaging and ugly. Instead of saying, well, we have a few problems, but we're getting there. And we're working as hard as we can with what we have. We'll say things like, well, they weren't very kind to me. But maybe we go someplace else and they weren't very kind to you, and you never say a word. Then we also talk about fundraising. How do we fundraise? How are we spending our monies? Alabama State has one of the largest football fields. It's almost as large as Ted Turner Field. Alabama State was in a lawsuit some years ago, and they received large amounts of money from the state of Alabama, as did Mississippi too, I think. And the first thing they did with the money that they received was what? We're going to build a big what? Stadium. How many times are you going to fill that stadium? So if you had built a science lab or something else, how many scientists would you have produced? Or a math lab? Or something dealing with technology? How are we using the funds that we receive? And this does not only occur in higher ed, it also occurs in government, period. And you come and see me sometime, and I have some stories for you. Who are our donors? Who do we ask for money? Who contributes outside of the alumni? Do we form meaningful relationships and partnerships with companies and corporations that will generate income for HBCUs? Yes, sometimes we can trust, and sometimes we can't. But where do we get those resources from? We have to create a culture of giving back to our HBCUs before the students leave the campus. When they come as a freshman, you have to say to them, it's important for you to be here, to love this institution. It's your legacy. It's what you bring here. A lot of people say, well, the school didn't give me anything, but what did you bring? What did you contribute while you were there? Create endowments. Give or bequeath money or property to an institution. Some of you don't have heirs, but you have money. And you don't want to just give it to somebody that's going to waste it. So give it to your school. And sometimes you can do it through monthly installments. Ask those people that work in foundation. You work on campus and others in here, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. We also talk about leadership, which is so important in any organization, whether it's K through 12 or post-secondary. We have to look at the people that we're putting in charge of our HBCUs. Do they love them like we do? Will they go and lobby for resources? Because if you're not at the table, you're going to be what? The lunch. You're going to get eaten up, right? So you have to be there, and you have to have strong leaders that will support you and support your legacy and support your love for your institutions. Sometimes we want to hire, that he was, and we made these mistakes. But he was an alum, so he's deserving. It's time for us to get somebody there. But that may not be a good leader. Maybe a good talker, a big show-off, but what can that person contribute to that institution? You need progressive thinking, innovative, and strong leaders that aren't afraid to advocate and lobby on your behalf. That's what you need. Not only the president, but the deans, the provost, department heads, and faculty members. And faculty members that care about the what? The student. If you don't care about the students, you don't have any business working in the institution. If it's all about you, then you don't have any business there. You must have student-oriented people, again, and student-focused, student-centered, technology-savvy, and that understand the importance of globalization. It's not just an Albany state by itself. Don't wall yourselves in. Don't be afraid to extend yourselves to other institutions and expose students to it as much as possible. Now, there are some guidelines for success, and I'm just about done with this. Establish financial blueprints for sustainability. We must have blueprints. Most of the HBCUs in the state of Georgia have very low endowments. Very low endowments. And the giving is not nearly where it needs to be. I've heard people come, I haven't been to homecoming in 40 years, but I want a free ticket for the game. I want to get into the dance without pay. And they have so much to say about everything and everybody. And nothing makes them happy. But they haven't been on the campus in 40 years. They sent their children someplace else. Because they said, well, you know, UGA is that's the place to be now. But you know, a lot of times we'll go and stay about a semester. And where do we see them? Back on what? Albany State's campus. Not because they aren't good students. We want quality too. Make data-driven decisions about the direction that you want to take the institution. Keep track of your goals and outcomes and empower the black males that are on our campuses. And recruit them also. Revamp curricula that align with 21st century needs and living. You know, sometimes we have to stop and look to see if we're keeping up with what's going on. And here I am, I'm going to use that word again, globally. Sometimes we are working with stale information and research. We have to keep our students and ourselves. We want to become lifelong learners. And that's what you teach the students. Emphasize leadership and teacher preparation. Here again, our teacher education programs are dying. They're dying, and we need to have more teachers. And those of us that have been in the education field, don't discourage others from becoming good teachers or becoming teachers. We need to have quality teachers in our schools today. Advocate professionally for social and economic justice. Those things are so important to the stability of the black community. And I can say that because HBCUs are the reason why we have a black middle and upper class. Be vocal about underrepresented blacks in the workplace and in government. Being a legislator sometimes, especially when governorships change and other offices change, you will find that black leadership diminishes based on who's in charge. So one year, I wrote a letter
That's America.
to a governor, and I'm not going to call the name of the governor. And I told him, I went to your office today, or I came to your office, and I was treated like a second-class citizen, and there was absolutely nobody there in that office that looked like me. And the next time I went back, it had changed. Just a little, but it kept changing and changing. That's what we have to do. And it was a letter of sincerity, and it wasn't ugly, but it was a matter of fact kind of letter. And I don't usually share those kinds of personal stories, but I did, and I still have a copy of that letter. Set collective goals for the future of HBCUs for Black communities. Strengthen Black leadership through research and data collection. And then we work. We can't do this 1 year and then we change and then we continue to change. What we do must be sustainable. You must have the resources to do it with, and we must learn to collaborate and make alliances that will get us where we need to be. We have so much to offer, and we have to live and tell the HBCU story, because a lot of us don't want that. I have folks that I've worked with. They'll have a chain that says UGA where they got their second degree, or Purdue where they got their second degree. But you never would know that they went to Albany State, or Savannah State, or Fort Valley State. Because it's not cute, it's not posh, it's not happening, yes. So we have to feel some responsibility for living the legacy and telling the story. Now, let me talk about SB 273, which is what everybody's waiting for, and that's fine, because I'm ready to go. Thank you. SB 273 was authored by Lester Jackson, Senator Lester Jackson from Savannah, Georgia. The signers on the bill were Gail Davenport, Spelman College, Tanya Anderson, Alabama State, Harold Jones, South Carolina State, Nikema Williams, Talladega, and Freddie Powell-Sims, Fort Valley State. Senator Jackson is a colleague and was a friend. So, your colleagues you trust, and when they say we're going to do a study committee to continue studying all of the things that I just went through, then that's what we believed. We signed off on a study committee. And it morphed into, or was changed into something that said SB 273. When it said SB 273, those of us that had signed on with Senator Jackson took our names, or removed our names from what we discovered was a bill. We all removed our names. On a Monday, we were not in session, we were in recess. And that's when we removed our names. Day 39 came, day 40 came on that Tuesday, which was April 2nd, the last day of the session. But prior to that, on that Monday, Senator Jackson had a press conference. We were scheduled to appear with him. We did not go. to the press conference with him because he chose to continue the bill. Once we removed our names, the bill became dead. He decided that he would do SB 278, a new bill, with pretty much the same language. And I understand if the language had been the very same, it would not have been filed. So somewhere along the line, words were changed. It could have been a may, a shall, nothing significant, but pretty much the same content. It was changed to now there's SB 278. When session resumes next year, he can refile the bill, but it has many, many steps to go through and many hurdles before it can even be considered as a bill, law. It has to go through committee. And as the massive rejection by HBCU alumni and friends suggests that it probably, and I'm saying probably, which means you keep your eyes on the process. Never take your eyes off of anything because there aren't any guarantees in government. I can assure you of that. But it means that it can come back next year as SB 278. I don't know the new signers on the bill, but those of us that signed on originally with SB 273 is dead. It no longer exists. And he didn't stop. So if I can't get it done this way, I'll get it done another way. And that's why we have SB 278 today.
Yes.
What is your understanding?
Can you please hold a minute? Are you done, Senator?
Can I ask some questions?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So happy to see so many of you here. Let me take a real quick survey of who's here. First, if you're a student at Albany State or Fort Valley or Savannah State currently, please raise your hand. If you are an alum, please raise your hand. Oh, wonderful. That means our alum really cares. You're here. Thank you so much. If you are an alum of either Fort Valley or Savannah State, raise your hand. They care, you care. If you are employed by or associated with either of these schools, raise your hand. You care. And we thank all of the other interested citizens. If you're just a citizen who cares about our beloved HBCUs, particularly Albany State, please raise your hand. Just a citizen who cares. Thank you. And I also want to thank Mr. Curry. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Malone, for that scholarly treaty. And thank you, Senator Sims, for all the information you brought us. Now, let's be clear that this meeting really is focused on the provisions of SB 73, but now that we have the information that it is dead, I would like to start off, if we could, by being very clear, if we can, about what is in SB 278. And then we're gonna take
It ain't
some
really
questions.
no
I'd
info
like
on
to
it.
ask Senator Sims if she could tell us ABC 1, 2, 3, what is contained in SB 78, and then we're gonna throw it out to the audience.
SB 278 pretty much has the same language as SB 273, which suggests a merger between among the three public HBCUs in the state of Georgia. So that's pretty much the gist of it. And the part that, well, all of it is troubling. Every bit of it is troubling. There is a massive backlash against this bill. Let me be perfectly clear about that. We are here, or I am here, not to bring you excuses as to why it was done, but to tell you the truth. And the truth of the matter is, SB 273 was the brainchild of an individual that we call a colleague and a friend, who in the past had mentioned it, and we told him no. This was brought up last summer, and we told him that that's not what we're studying when we talk about HBCUs. And he has been insistent upon carrying it forth, and that's why we have SB 278. And here again, right now, 278 was filed on day 39. Next year, the first day of session, it can be read. It can be assigned to a committee after the first reading. Then it goes through a very strenuous committee assignment, which means, and it's going to come from the Senate. So senators will, in a committee, it has to be assigned to a committee. It could be the Ag Committee, which probably not. Most times, bills that deal with higher ed are assigned to the higher ed committee, but it could be assigned to another committee based on where the author wants that bill to be placed. But chances are it will come under great scrutiny.
Just real quickly, my recollection in reading it, which is not total, is that it said also that the governor would appoint the members of this new board, that it would not be a part of the Board of Regents. These things are really very important to understand about the provision of this bill. The particulars are important. And I wish that we had them in front. I was trying to look them up, but somebody please look up that.
Here you go.
And yeah, it is that you are actually separating classy versus
Separate but equal.
You're separating it from you're separating it from the Board of Regents and creating your own board, and that board would be governed by appointees from the governor,
Political.
There are 19 board members on the government.
Too political.
Yeah, I just want you all to understand the provisions of what we're talking about, and we just needed to make that clear. So if you would please, somebody can look it up so that we can have this. Okay.
We have the hard copy here.
Can you just read those provisions for me?
So one of the provisions would be.
We can't hear you back there.
You got him.
Okay, good evening, I'm Fiona Jackson. I am
student at Auburn State University.
Amen.
And president of Young Democrats of Georgia County and city chair for SGA for 2019-2020 at Auburn State.
All right.
So I rated the assignment was in the so the main provisions will be removing these 3 institutions from the university system of Georgia, which, like they said, will be under an entirely different board of regents. 11 of those people would be appointed by the governor, and then the school would be able to appoint, the alumni committee would be able to appoint members to the board, and so on and so forth. Then they would be consolidating those 3 institutions into Georgia Agricultural and Mechanical, and then each university would have their city name beside it. So GAMU of Albany, GAMU of Savannah, GAMU of Fort Valley. And then also I know it said something about the board will be able to appoint the leadership of those institutions. So I took that to mean that we would lose our president and our provost and our VPs. That again to me was an issue because I feel like students should be a part of that process. So those are the 3 main things that most people on campus were having problems with.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that, because that is what we needed to hear. We needed to hear the particulars of that bill. Now, we also needed to understand what Senator Powell-Sims said, and that is that 273 is dead, but these provisions carry forward, and it could be reintroduced next year. So, if you would please, focus your questions on the implications of what we talked about. And as if you know John Howard, you know that he has the ground rules here for these questions. They must be asking for information, and he said, and these are his words to me, that he didn't want dissertations, and he doesn't want essays. And we are going to be respectful because this is indeed a very serious issue facing this entire community. So let's get started with the questions, please. I don't know if there's a microphone. There's a microphone, so you're going to have to speak loudly. And I'm going to start with a hand here. Hold on just a second. And I'm going to name the first 3. The hand here, you, sir, and Commissioner Williams. First 3.
Okay, I just have a curiosity question. Okay, this committee, this study committee that was assigned, Senator Sims called out all of the names, and we'd like to thank you for that research that y'all did. But I was wondering, where did that assignment come from? Did the governor make that assignment?
No, we always ask. We always ask for study committees.
Okay.
And we asked if we could study the progress of HBCUs or the challenges that HBCUs are having in the state. But anytime there is a study committee, we ask. Now, sometimes you can get assigned by your lieutenant governor and most times the governor does not get involved in study committees. They come from within the chambers that you operate from, either the House or the Senate. But we asked the lieutenant governor if we could have a study committee to focus on HBCUs, public HBCUs in the state of Georgia.
Thank you. Now, one last question.
Yes.
The conclusion of that committee, does anyone receive that information?
Yes.
Who received it?
Well, let me tell you what, study committees are usually formed for policy reasons. In other words, if we want to introduce a bill that deals with HBCUs, be it funding or enrollment or research or anything, we would formulate policy based on the study and the research that we've done.
So where did our information go? That's my last question.
Well,
just out of curiosity, and it's not important. If it's not important to anybody,
It's important.
I was just curious that all of this work was done, and it went there. Nobody listened, and one person only committee seem to have drawn a conclusion
Well,
that
let
works
me tell you this.
for everybody else, and I
That
understand
person rarely came, and in fact, I don't recall him coming to any meetings at all.
My question is,
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. And my question is going to lead into that. With this study committee,
Yes.
okay, what was your overall objective? What were you trying to prove? What were you trying to accomplish with this study committee? And were you looking to create more funds for the schools or to start the legwork? Because in the state that we're in now, with all these mergers and these formula fundings are coming from the government, from the state of Georgia, saying if students not graduating, students not enrolling, we may want to look at different models and change these models so that we can change the makeup of these schools. And the study committee was done to address these issues, but was there any outcomes derived from what you found to say, hey, we're going to help these students, these schools with enrollment, we're going to give them more money, appropriate more funds? What was the intent?
The study is not complete. The second study committee should be going on right now. That was the intent of having an additional study committee. HBCUs are complicated, and we know that. Funding is complicated. So it will take time to formulate policy. It's not an overnight kind of roundtable discussion. We plan on visiting campuses, all 3 campuses, and we also want to include our private institutions as well. Somebody else? Mr. Williams?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
along that line, there should be a production of a summary with intent to implement before a bill is submitted. And I would like for that to be ushered through and for us to be politically lobbyists. So my question is, can we get the copies of the summary that has already been studied? Study Committee 1, Study Committee 2.
We have a summary of that committee. The first committee, study committee, sunsetted in December of 2018, but I'll be happy to get a copy for you.
Get that out to us.
Sure. Copies. Yes.
But just to be clear, what I think I heard the senator say is that there was 1 year of the study committee. The study committee did not complete its work. And the intent was to have a second year of study of the issue. That did not happen. Instead, it morphed pretty clumsily into a bill that was obviously premature. So that seems to be, if I'm correct, where we stand. Okay, so knowing that, let's see where the questions are. Ms. Velma in the back, and you here second, and you're third.
Yes, Senator, as a student at Dartmouth State College back in 2000, I befriended a young lady that worked in the financial aid office at Dartmouth College. She advised me of this merger with Albany State College and Dartmouth College, and she told me that this merger was going to be happening upon my transfer and graduating from Dartmouth and then going to Albany State College to finish up. She told me that this was going to happen. The majority of us never heard anything about this. I heard about this same language that is going on right now, but nothing was ever put before the community until about 4 or 5 years before this merger actually happened. I want to know that you all are saying that there was a bill and that there are studies that were going on. Where are we actually at? I want to know, is it that we're going to know before this actually happened? Because what I'm trying to say is what happened in 2000, and here it was a few years ago, there was a merger between Albany State and Dartmouth College.
My original statement was, and if you listen to all of the things that the study encompassed last summer. None of it was about merger. None of it was about combining the schools. None of it. This is the brainchild of somebody's. We did not talk about mergers at all. We talk about HBCUs all the time. Even when we are dealing with funds and appropriations, those of us that sit on appropriations committees, we talk about, and let me give you an example. We just passed the marijuana bill. I think most of you are aware of that. There are 21 Democrats in the Senate. 56 total members. So subtract 21 from 56 to find out how many Republicans we have. If those 21 Democrats had said, we're not voting for the marijuana bill, it would not have passed because we had 20 Republicans that voted against it. Now, this is what we said. UGA was awarded the opportunity to do research with the marijuana. And we said, as a Black caucus and as a Democratic caucus, we're not going to vote for the bill if Fort Valley State, which is a research institution, is not included. So we advocate, and sometimes you don't even know we're advocating for the HBCUs. And I know everything sounds like, okay, this is an excuse, but it's not. There are a lot of things that are done that you're not even aware of. And this is why I say, stay vigilant. There are things that will get by, but this is too big to get by. It is too large. There is, I can't think of a committee in the Georgia legislature that will pass this SB 278 and win. I just can't think of one. Okay? Now, to say that somebody is not having a conversation, I can't say that. Because there's always conversation about something going on in the legislature, in government, that you will not be aware of.
I do hate to interrupt.
Yes.
We only have 15, we have actually about 10 minutes, and if we could do, you have your questions, please make them to the point,
Okay.
and please do the answers to the point. And you had the lady sitting right here, and then we'll get 3 more, and I think that's how we're going to conclude it.
I just want to thank Mr. Howard for this forum. And unfortunately, I didn't graduate from HBCU. You know what? I say it every time. Every time. No, so when you go to school in Utah, you go to school in Mexico, and then you go to a school. I'm going to my question, because I'm trying to get to my question. When you go to a school, then when you get to Jacksonville State University in Alabama, where it's about 10% black, you think you're at HBCU. That's my mindset. Now, I had 3 children. Getting to my question, I had 3 children. One graduated from Jacksonville State. My other daughter graduated from Auburn University. And my baby girl graduated from the University of Alabama. Sad. When they could have scholarships at Tuskegee. But here's my question, though. First of all, I want to thank Ms. Malone. Her presentation was such refreshing, very, very refreshing. I think she touched a lot of points that deal with my question, but to the Senator.
Come on, ask your question.
Running out of time.
And that's why I want to appreciate you working for us. It's difficult working for us. And this is the root of my question. What are we doing to change the thinking? The thinking. See, because he said it, as a man thinketh, so is he. What are we doing to change the way we think? Because I might have a daughter that goes to Auburn, but she had a full scholarship to choose to go to Tuskegee. What do we do to change it?
The question is, how do we change the way we think? And if you could answer that very quickly.
Influence usually comes star square. And I'm not being mean to you.
We spent 5 minutes
Simmer
here.
down. Simmer down, please. Next question.
Okay. I feel a little intimidated since everybody is shouting that you have to ask a question. Okay, a question can come at the end of a very long paragraph. I'm an English instructor at Albany State University.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I came in late, so I'm sure that I missed a lot, but I want to say this. I'm sure that was talked of, we need to say by HBCU, okay? The black. That seems to be the problem. I think it is time for us to change that thinking and think in terms of what is right versus wrong, okay? We need to stop looking at color. It's time to look at quality as opposed to color. I've been an instructor there. Albany State was a university, was an HBCU when I attended in the 70s. Albany State is no longer an HBCU. I don't know what it is, okay? All of the policies, all of the standards have been compromised and sacrificed. Somebody said that they were going to restructure and realign and we would lose our provost. What provost? What assistant provost? What provost that sends the message to the students that they don't have to follow the student handbook? Okay, my question is, when are we going to stop always looking at black and white and consider right versus wrong? Our students at Albany State University deserve better than what we're giving them.
She's right.
Thank you, ma'am.
She's right. She's right.
It's Senator Sims to answer that question.
Let me just comment on the last few words that you said. You said that our students deserve better than what we are giving them. Many of us in this room would not be where we are had it not been for those struggling HBCUs. I feel strongly that the roles that were delegated or that I was privileged to be a part of at Fort Valley State University prepared me and those teachers that I had that were role models for me, that were leaders for me, prepared me for where I am today. And, you know, everybody in this room has some form of discrimination.
Continuing.
That's the natural
Continuing. That's
order
America.
of nature. I mean, we can't change that. It's behavior. There are things that we like, things that we don't like, people that we like, people that we don't like. But when you say quality, we have some of the best students. And if you look at the leaders in this country, that are black, the majority of them are HBCU products. So that's not.
Can we please? We only have 4 minutes, and I see the mayor's raising her hand and William Wright, and I think that's the band. The band's raising her hand. William Wright raised his much earlier, and I'm so sorry now. That's it. Those are John Howard's rules, and we're gonna have to live by them. What we did? Okay. Well, we had one. Hold on just a second. We'll get you, and that'll be the third one and the final one. The man, Mr. Wright, and listen, please ask a question. We don't have but a few minutes, and we need answers here today. Okay?
So I the future of our country, of our community. And so one of the ways I think that we can help ourselves is by sending our children and our grandchildren to our alma maters. My children and grandchildren have no problem because if they have get any money that I have for them, it's at Albany State. So that's one thing. The second thing is, Senator Sims, when the study committee does conclude and make recommendations, where will the recommendations go? And will the state citizens have an opportunity to vote on them?
That's why I'm constantly trying to remind you that this is a continuation. We want to come to Albany State. We want to go to Fort Valley. We want to go to Savannah State. And we want to talk to the students on campus, the faculty, the president. We want to do all of that so that we can compile the information and formulate policy. That's what study committees are all about. So, does that answer your question, Mayor?
Yes, so
Now, Mr. Wright, and then the student up front, and we will conclude. Now, Mr. Wright, I know your propensity.
Don't do it like that. Don't do it like that.
Thank you. Just ask a question if you would.
Don't do it like that.
My question is, first of all, did the study committee hear from the federal government the Office of Civil Rights? And the reason I ask that is because the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights entertained this same question under the Reagan administration. And one of the reasons we have what we have, and I have some of that information too, and instructed Albany State and Fort Valley and that. But the thing about it is the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights dealt with the issue about underfunding and the success of HBCUs. What President Reagan did was he stopped funding the Office of Civil Rights in that office. He gave a report back and told them everything was fine. So they withheld the money and then they stopped the desegregation. You may remember it was the NAACP, the Legal Defense Fund.
Oh, he gonna give you history now.
And the education. Well, I'll stop right here.
Yeah, just ask your question again, please.
Did the study committee hear there were 2 reports done on the success dealing with the integration of the institution? It was under the case of Adams versus Richardson.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wright, but we have not completed the study. We really haven't. But I will take, and I really want to sit with you and talk. Can I do that at some point in time? No. This is not just a put off. Okay. This is a request that I meet with you, Mr. Wright, and I'll be happy to do that so we can talk about what you think we need to do.
There's no need to reinvent the wheel.
Hold on, Mr. Wright, this young lady.
Okay, so we're all in the agreement that we don't want this bill to pass.
Right.
So what do we as citizens, as alumni students, what do we need to do to make sure that this goes nowhere? To make sure, whose neck do we have to step on? Who do we need to meet? Whose office do we need to go to and rally at? What do we need to do to make sure that this is just shut down and
Usually what happens with this kind of bill, there's a lobbyist in place. You know what a lobbyist is? Everybody knows. A person that will watch the progression of the bill. But you also have state representatives, you have senators, all from this area. And that's our job to watch the progression of anything negative or positive that can affect or impact the HBCUs. So it's our responsibility to watch it. We immediately pulled our names from that bill when we found out how negatively it would impact the schools. So it's our responsibility, but as alumni, I would strongly suggest that you have somebody in place, because I have 11 counties, but all that state is very important to me. Okay?
I'm so sorry, our time is up. Now, I think there needs to be, when we conclude this, we need to say that maybe there's a volunteer group that needs to get together and talk about exactly what you're talking about. So if you would, I'm going to do this sheet of paper, come up here, sign the back of it, give me your contact information, and maybe someone can get with you, or we can get with you, and we can sit down and talk over an extended period of time about the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s going forward. What can we do? So with that, thank you all so much, and
Can you use the microphone? Let me say thanks to Senator Freddie Powell-Sims now and do this. And let me thank you all for coming to understand. I'm
on, dude.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long afternoon, but I think that we should give our students a round hand of applause. I'm going to end on this, which I am a guru of historical black institution, as Senator Sims said, is 101. 101 is a drug. So you got to think outside the box, and it's not only these ABC students, but most of the students in Atlanta, like the private students, they now need foundation, money, and grants, and realize that a lot of them have cut out athletic sports, like athletics, balancing, drop back down, North Lake went back down because they could not afford the trips and all that. But BSMA, this is another meeting that we need to continue to be aware of, and she gave us the homework that this bill is going to cover in 2020. So if you decide to sit back and relax, you're going to pray on the good thing, here's what happens. And we're going to say, hey,